Welcome to Voices Against Violence, a Harmony House podcast to educate, empower, and serve as a voice for survivors. We aim to shed light on crucial issues surrounding domestic violence, offer support, and inspire action for change. Join us as we work together to create a community where all individuals can live a life free of abuse.
Welcome back to Voices Against Violence. My name is Kirstyn Walker. I serve as the Assistant Executive Director at Harmony House.
Charity Jordan Rex, Prevention Program Manager here at Harmony House. Kirstyn, what are we talking about today?
We have a special guest today, Shelby from Abilities, which is a local nonprofit. So excited to have a conversation with you about the intersection of domestic violence and individuals with disabilities. March is Developmental Disability Awareness Month. So just excited to talk about this topic with you. Thanks for coming on.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me.
Shelby, what can you tell us about Abilities?
So Abilities has been in the Southwest Missouri community since 1985. We serve 8 counties surrounding Greene. So Greene would be one of the 8. We go all the way down into Taney and Stone, up to Polk and Dallas, Lawrence, Webster, Christian, Greene. So we're serving a large part of this area. There are 21 centers in the state of Missouri. So we're one of 21. So every county in Missouri is covered by a center.
Great.
We have 5 core services that we have to provide: advocacy, peer support, information referral, independent living skills, and transition. We help people move out of nursing facilities into the community, as well as youth transitioning into adulthood. So those are the 5 core services. And then, of course, we have other programs where we help veterans and individuals who need attendance in their home with daily living tasks. We also have a home modifications program and an access department. We're helping with getting people hearing aids and doing hearing tests, wheelchairs, durable medical equipment. So basically helping people live their best independent life. So we cover the entire lifespan. We might have like a family, maybe a deaf parent who's raising a baby, needs a crier signaler. When the baby cries, it's a flashing light.
Oh, okay.
To a youth who's going through the school system who has like an individual education plan and they need support figuring out, how to make sure they can succeed in school. It might be like a young person who has a car accident who ends up in a nursing home. Suddenly their home's not accessible. They don't know how to drive, the same way. So just even connecting them with other people who've been through that lived experience so they can figure out how to go home and maybe go back to work or keep going through life. It could be a parent who's aging and then their adult child is trying to help them navigate life after retirement, maybe developing a disability or just with aging, people develop all kinds of things. So I'm really proud to say we cover everything.
So much. Not only is it so many services, it's such a wide area.
Yeah. And I'm giving a lot of examples because it is really hard to describe. So those are just a few of the things that I can think in my mind, right now that we would help someone with. But information referral, we will talk to anyone. So even if you have a loved one or you're working with someone and are a caregiver or in the business of helping people, you can call us and we can try to see what you need. And if we don't do it, then we'll connect you with who does.
Wow.
So
excellent. That referral process that I feel like is such a important part of all of the nonprofit sector is just knowing, even if we don't serve that particular need, where can we refer out to? So,
and we have referred people to Harmony House.
Of course. I was spending some time on your website and noticed that Harmony House was listed as a partner. So thank you so much. I mean, it's going to take all of us, right?
Yes.
Working together. So,
definitely.
Well, thanks for being here today. So excited to talk to you about this topic. I was telling you on the way in that this is something that I feel like once you learn, you can't unlearn it. And it really just shapes how you consider the really specific ways that domestic violence can impact folks with disabilities. So can you speak to how domestic violence uniquely impacts folks with disabilities?
So I would say some people have disabilities because of domestic violence. So that has occurred, quite often in my career where I meet someone and maybe they don't even recognize it. Head trauma, brain injury, physical disabilities as well. So there's that. But then people who depend on like a spouse or a loved one, even sometimes like a sibling, caregiver, family member, and it changes that relationship because maybe they do need a little bit of support and assistance, but then the person that is caregiving for them is actually, emotionally abusive or physically abusive. It's really difficult, I think, for people when it is someone that to set that boundary. And I actually have a good friend, and she was in a relationship, and I think she still is, and it was healthy, but we talked about that quite a bit. She was in her 30s and really afraid to be on her own. And so whether this relationship was healthy or not, it put her in a very vulnerable position to stay because of her physical disability. And her diagnosis was progressive, and it was different every single day. And if you don't have a partner or someone in your life that really understands that, some disabilities might zap your energy. So one day you're, ready to go, and the next day you're down and you're, tired or weak. So I think that can definitely create a lot of extra barriers that people might have, especially if it's happening and they need to leave or have to make that decision to, exit the situation. And then developmental disabilities, I think too, if, throughout your life, you didn't have people who are helping you learn about boundaries, and you're put in situations where there are people who may take advantage or recognize that you have, a cognitive disability or learning disability, especially, you might end up in a situation you don't even recognize as unhealthy.
Yes.
So all of those things, and there's others, I'm sure, but.
Well, there's so much to unpack there in just that initial answer. I mean, we see all kinds of reasons why folks stay in unhealthy or abusive situations. And just that added component of the uncertainty of being able to, of like the caregiving component of it all. And we know that domestic violence centers around power and control, and that can show up in those situations. So one thing that you mentioned was maybe there's not even an awareness that maybe that is an unhealthy or is abusive behavior. One thing that I used to speak with folks about is the like infantilization of folks with disabilities, and then just a refusal to educate about safe dating practices or consent, and how that just, it doesn't give us any context for what we're experiencing then later in life if those things do end up happening.
I think that's very true. Education is key, and just really starting as early as possible. And I think it can be, modified to individuals with disabilities, but just having, women or families or, even individuals, men together kind of sharing experiences and supporting each other could be, impactful too. Because I think sometimes people with disabilities are isolated, and they may not recognize that there are other people out there going through the same kind of thing. I know, it's even more difficult actually when people have to hire someone to be a caregiver. And I've known at least one person in the most recent year or two where, because the caregivers are paid through certain programs, it's a very low amount. But they can't get real good quality care. So they might have to settle for someone that is taking advantage or in a desperate situation. And that's really scary, especially for people with spinal cord injuries who are paralyzed or in their bed and depending on people. There was actually a situation where a woman had a caregiver who was, doing things in the restroom at her home, and she didn't even know it. And, she found needles and all kinds of, things that proved that. And it's just really scary that she is in a vulnerable position living as she just, lived by herself, owned her own home. So even stranger violence and, things that happen when people have to depend on someone off the streets because they want to stay as independent as possible. We meet every day people who do not want to be in a facility. They don't want to be in the nursing home. They want to live on their own. And so it's just kind of hard when you do have to depend on a caregiver and support, and sometimes your pool of people that you pick from, may not be the healthiest. So.
Well, and just some statistics as we're going through and having this conversation, setting the stage. Folks with disabilities experience higher rates of domestic violence and sexual assault. 70% of disabled people experience some form of abuse and are 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted, with the most common perpetrators of violence against women with disabilities being their male partners. So just kind of setting the stage there. When we think about the different types of abuse, Charity and I talk often about physical, financial, emotional, psychological, sexual abuse. Are there specific types of abuse that show up with folks with disabilities, or are there strategies, I guess, that are specific to having a disability?
So I would say a big one is financial, and I think it goes both ways where they can't, someone who's on a limited income because of, not being able to work or on Social Security just may be more dependent on someone else to split the rent with or to pay for groceries and that kind of thing. So if you're in a situation where you may need to leave because of your income, you can't. And then that could also go with young people, either depending on others or even staying with their family who may not be healthy for them because they're not able to live on their own. Mm-hmm. I know prices are going up and it's becoming more difficult to pay rent, utilities. A lot of people, because of their income, don't have a car or because of their disability, don't have a way to have their own transportation. So that can put an extra barrier there.
Sure.
But I would say financial, definitely. I know several people who've been in a situation where, like with online dating, they were promised a lot from someone. And I think when they finally encounter this person, it's definitely a situation where that person is taking advantage of them. But just even being isolated and lonely, that person, wanted to reach out and try to meet new people. And especially if you have a cognitive disability or maybe you aren't in charge of your own finances or you're not making your own decisions, a partner or someone else could easily, take advantage. So I think financial, but then emotional, I think that's sometimes really difficult, like you said, infantilizing or just, I think that's the word.
I think it is too. Yeah. I don't know if it is either.
Yeah. It's just kind of that.
You can check that.
Yeah. Just kind of that idea that you don't have the ability to make your own decisions or you're not taken seriously. And I think the more we learn about different types of disabilities, the actor who was in Grey's Anatomy passed away, and I was just watching that this morning, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking, this is actually good. I mean, they have interviews with him talking about how his, disability progressed, and seeing someone who went one day from, able to be, full time working and then having things that limit them. We're all going through changes. 1 in 4 people have a disability. And so that's a high number in itself.
Absolutely.
But I think that emotional, it's like an attitudinal barrier just in society in general, where, we work a lot on equal access and making sure people aren't left out. And so that right there sometimes is just this concept that you're less than maybe, or you don't deserve, the same access as everyone else. It's like, we have to do this for you. You're asking for special privileges. So I think it could start from like more of a societal attitude. And then that just kind of trickles down. And I see more, I have a 15-year-old, and just with, his classes and the things that he learns, I think schools are trying to teach sensitivity. Bullying especially is, sometimes a problem in schools. And so hopefully that'll change over time with new generations. But I think emotional abuse, but stemming from a bigger issue of how people with disabilities are perceived in society.
Well, and when we look at our power and control wheel around domestic violence, specifically individuals with disabilities, there is a specific power and control wheel. And where we normally see like privilege being identified on the power and control wheel, we see ableism on that one. And so that conversation around it's a societal idea that someone is less than or not worthy of, that's really that ableism showing up as privilege around power and control. Yeah.
We just shared a webinar. Sorry, I just thought that this, it's a training for nurses to learn how to work with women who are pregnant who have a disability.
Okay.
And just even that is like kind of a new concept. How do you make sure you can provide the same kind of care for someone who has other health issues, but they're pregnant, So I'm excited to see more of that kind of for professionals and people working with individuals. So they're kind of ready to think about it. But it's...
So you kind of touched on this just a minute ago, but we've talked about on previous episodes how our underlying beliefs and maybe stereotypes really are kind of what pave the way towards people being susceptible to harm, to violence. So I'm wondering if you can speak to what are some of the more harmful, maybe social norms or stereotypes around folks with disabilities that can lead them to experience violence.
So I would say invisible disabilities, when people have, things that aren't visible, sometimes they're not believed. And so pain and some of the things people experience when they're telling others about it, they may be brushed off, or if they're in a relationship, it may not be obvious and the partner may not believe them or give them space or, what they need. And then I think caregivers can create that power relationship where it's like, I'm taking care of you. And so I think that can easily get blurred because they are in a position of being able to control the person in a sense, especially if they're depending on them for physical movement. Like I said, spinal cord injuries and where you're maybe kind of homebound, but you have this other person that's helping you move to another room or feeding you. So I definitely think those can set you up for situations that might lead to, an abuse of the relationship. I did work at a domestic violence shelter before, and I know there are so many examples I can think of. One, like an emotional support animal. I know you guys probably deal with that, where someone is depending on a pet, or not a pet, an animal, to provide that emotional support. And there is a law that protects them in housing. So if you're in an apartment, you can have an emotional support animal. But if you need to go into shelter or leave that animal, and that is your lifeline, you may stay. And then you're in the situation that is leading to more, danger. And then sometimes it might be the partner or the person that's abusing the individual that has the disability, and I think sometimes I have seen in older adults memory loss and disabilities that are, creating the person to forget who their wife or husband is. I mean, some of those things we haven't really created like trainings around, but I think that's probably something we need to look at, because I think as people change, with a mental health illness or like a diagnosis of, Alzheimer's or dementia, that can really set up a relationship to change. I'm not really sure if I answered your question.
No, you did. I'm also curious, survivors are in such a precarious and dangerous position, and then having a disability just adds a whole other layer. I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about how they can be isolated. I'm wondering how do folks on the outside, like maybe the neighbor or someone else who maybe suspects, how do you begin to, I guess, support an individual who maybe because of their disability are being isolated even more, which is common with all survivors.
Yeah.
Abusers want to isolate, but how do you begin to offer support to those folks?
Yeah. Well, I think physical access is important. So if you definitely notice that someone maybe uses a wheelchair but can't get out of the house, there are places like Empowerabilities where we might be able to provide a ramp or something that would allow them not to just escape, but get out of the house. I mean, there are actually people that are trapped. They live in a space that just isn't, they can't do the steps with wheels, Sometimes it's just grab bars in the bathroom, so they can be a little bit more independent. But I think, just knowing that maybe they could call us and get the resources, you as the support, neighbor, family member, whoever, don't have to know everything. But I think, sometimes people don't realize they need a safety plan. But just knowing that they can count on you if, they need to talk or share something. I've actually taken calls from people and just said, do you need to make a safety plan? Just because I had that back experience, I kind of knew, but it's like, do you know where your battery charger is for your wheelchair? Do you have your medication in a place where you could easily grab it? Because a lot of times people, and this is emergency preparedness in a sense too, because if you don't have what you need in case of an emergency, then you're going to be stuck. And if you are a person that depends on a wheelchair that has a battery, your cell phone has to be charged so that you can make a call to someone because you don't have close family or, friends like right there. Medicine, if you're diabetic, thinking about, even insulin or food to have with you and snacks, whether you end up in, like a tornado or whether you end up, needing to leave because of, danger. I actually talked with someone just this week, and he was in a situation where he's not happy where he's living, and he was just kind of stuck in the bedroom, like, I'm not going to leave this room. And it did sound kind of scary. And it's like, okay, well, let's think about that. Do you have anyone that you could call if you needed to leave suddenly? You shouldn't be forced to be stuck in the bedroom, forever. So I think you don't have to be like the crisis counselor, but just helping them understand, like, I'm here to connect you, or recognizing that there may be some kind of resource for them. I don't know. It's like I was saying, I think it'd be really great to have more disability advocates cross-trained to help do those kinds of things where it's like immediate, but then we'll connect you with Harmony House or some other group. I know, just sometimes connecting people with counseling, like, hey, does your insurance pay for someone to talk to? Because they even have virtual counseling services now. And so just even mentioning that, because sometimes there's a stigma around that, but just getting, what's going on out, and maybe not to you, but someone else. Those are my ideas. It's hard though, I know, because you don't want to offend anyone. And sometimes I think people are afraid to approach someone who has a disability, not sure, because they may not feel equipped or trained. But I think just making sure we all think of each other as the same. We're all human. And sometimes people with disabilities want someone to ask them how they're doing. And maybe it's just that, like, how are you today? If you see them out getting their mail, or just, noticing if they're down or upset, just kind of gauging, just asking.
Right.
And that may be enough right there for them to know, oh, my neighbor talked to me. I am not isolated.
Potential safe person to talk to in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you brought up the idea of training, and in just research for this episode, I saw that only 35% of shelters surveyed have a disability awareness training for their staff, and only 16% have a dedicated staff person to deliver services to women with disabilities. And oftentimes we talked about like lack of access for services. So what can we do as service providers? What can crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, outside of training? Are there other things that you see could be areas where service providers are investing to be able to better serve individuals with disabilities?
Yes, I love that question, because I feel like when you work in crisis, I mean, if you're not ready for every type of situation, it's very difficult to provide that service. And thinking about all disabilities, even, getting a call from someone who's deaf, making sure the staff know how to handle that. And we have to do that too.
Of course.
51% of our staff at all centers and 51% of our board have to be individuals with disabilities. And there are 500 centers nationwide. So wherever you are, you could always reach out to your center, to ask for things like either a UB duo. A lot of times police officers use that, where if someone comes in, which you guys don't necessarily take walk-ins, but you could, chat or type back and forth on this machine. Sometimes you could use a cell phone, but if you take a phone call, Are You Ready to Take Missouri Relay is, that program where they'll talk to the person, through sign, and then you, as the crisis, person answering the phone, would hear the interpreter saying what you need to. A video phone, which I know the Justice Center has a video phone, or they did at one time. So that's one thing, the communication piece. There could be someone who uses Braille or large print, and just being ready and open. You don't have to necessarily have every document different languages. That's another thing. I'll have to talk to you later about NaviLens, but there is like a navigation system for people with low vision, and it actually also translates into like 20 some languages. Okay. So there are new ways of making sure communication is more accessible to a lot of people. We could be a great resource. I know some of the homeless, unhoused shelters are still out there, and they're working on like old buildings. Like, how do you make sure people can get in? How do you make sure if you have an elevator, it's always working? Thinking outside the box and just constantly kind of reviewing and observing either your location or your processes. And then helping staff feel comfortable, because I think that is the scary part, especially if you have a hotline worker in the middle of the night getting a call. And also being able to talk to people who may be in that situation where they do have a caregiver they depend on, say it's a company, so they don't want to leave because their aid's going to show up tomorrow. Or, just all these scenarios that could pop up. I'm thinking of how we could develop the training, just to give some examples. So I think physical space, and then the communication processes, and just as you're planning, as you're remodeling, as you're getting grants, just always thinking about that. Like, how can we be as inclusive as possible to any type of situation that pops up? Service animals are a big thing. I know everyone's kind of nervous about, allowing service animals in. Is that really a service animal? And some of those things are really gray. There's no black and white. And it does depend on the person providing the service to kind of make that decision. We want to, prevent discrimination, but at the same time, you don't have to, allow misuse of something because people are taking advantage. So I notice you have a wide doorway and a lever handle, just those things. And then once you start training the staff, I think they'll recognize it and maybe come up with ideas. And then also thinking about making sure you do hire people, or you have people on your board who have disabilities, so that you're always getting that voice and feedback from individuals. And maybe they've have lived experience with, domestic violence or not, but just they're also experiencing that daily living with, some barriers that exist. So those are things. There are a lot of, I know you had shared a shelter somewhere, or a group that had a lot of resources. I've been following a place in Austin, Texas. I think I sent you the link. It's like a shelter who actually has a disability services program. So they provide interpreters and, have training that they've developed and different handouts. So I think just exploring connections with other people in your field too. Like when you go to the MCADV conference, I've been before a long time ago, either, suggesting a session where everyone gets together statewide on this kind of topic, or connecting with other states that do it. There was a state that I saw, that was one of the things I was going to mention. It was a model where it was like the disability advocates, the domestic violence shelter advocates, and the police department, and kind of all sharing, their role and how they can work together. Wow. So looking for other partners too that you can include, so that everyone's kind of on the same page. I know we have a conference here every year. We were, and hopefully we'll continue. Abilities First has been a big part of that with Maggie. And I know that's kind of the goal of that, is to, always have a topic, or have like someone speaking to even being through that with a disability, so that people can hear real stories. I'm a visual person, so I like to hear like stories about, things that can come up. So if you've worked in a shelter and you've never had a situation, you may not think about it. And I think it's kind of like anything else. When you provide it, then people will know it's a safe place to go. And even though people may be isolated, they may be together isolated and not feeling comfortable reaching out. So just always being as welcoming as possible. We're working on a lot of things around websites right now, so we could be a resource. There will be a time where websites have to be completely accessible to those with screen readers. And it's been interesting because I think a lot of people don't think about it, but even social media, putting captioning on videos. Sure. And they're even saying that people depend on that, because you don't necessarily want to open your phone and watch a video with everyone around you, so you can read the video while you're maybe not supposed to be on your phone. It's like, it's kind of that universal design aspect.
Yes.
And one thing that's really awesome, I'm so happy you're building, is universal design, because I think, you designed it that way, but women with strollers and people with walkers and moving furniture and things around, thinking about how you can also benefit from some of those things. So if you're always ready for someone who has a disability, then it doesn't matter who you serve. It's kind of that concept. So
I love that idea. And I say a lot, when you were creating an environment that supports some of your most vulnerable folks, everyone is going to benefit. So if your building is accessible for folks who might have disabilities, it's going to make things easier for everyone, whether they have a disability or not. Like, it's just better for everybody.
Well, and you may have a family who has children with disabilities too. And so that's the other thing to think about. And you do want the woman or whoever it is as the parent to get out of that situation. So that may be a reason someone stays because their child, and we don't think about that all the time. We think about like the aging process and making sure that, you can still walk the steps at 80. Well, if you do a ramp, everyone can walk up it and it doesn't matter. But children aging throughout life too. And that could really change a family situation if they were able to remove, everyone from the danger and being open and just, even if you can't do it, like contacting us, do you have, a bath bench? Do you have reaching out to see if other community members can help you be that accessible place too. So you don't have to have it all figured out.
Well, I am so grateful to have you in our backyard because that is so great that we get to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And like you said, think through these things so that we can be as inclusive and welcoming as possible. And I'm also just thinking about the reach of the podcast. So Shelby, our podcast is in every continent except for Antarctica. We're working hard on Antarctica. But so I'm just thinking that, you mentioned that there are 500 centers across the United States. So your message might be heard in Indiana, and there maybe can be someone who with their local DV shelter or their local center are working together. So I'm just getting excited about the ripple effect of things like this.
I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, are there other points you wanted to touch on, other models or anything that you brought that you wanted to specifically talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I would just love to continue working with you. And I think if shelters and disability advocates, connected more, I think it would help everyone feel more comfortable. Just like someone in a shelter may be a little nervous about talking with someone who has a spinal cord injury and needs to leave their home. A disability advocate answering a call may be really nervous about someone saying like, I'm in danger, I need to leave. So the more confident we are, because, we're not all equipped to deal with crisis, but people are in crisis. So encouraging you guys to reach out to us and how we can help. And there are other disability organizations in the area too. And so I just feel like we should have our own conference here,
Charity and I love dreaming big. And so you will know that we love that idea.
We do have the local one, the Stop the Violence, and I love that one, but I'm just imagining case managers and people that are on the front lines really working together to come up with solutions.
We'll be inviting you to the Unconference, which is one that we're hosting.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I love you guys. So anything you can do to plug me in, I'm here.
I'm so grateful for this conversation.
This was great.
Hey, podcast listeners, you're invited to be a part of the most iconic event in Springfield, the Purple Party. The 11th annual Purple Party returns Friday, April 17th at the Oasis Hotel and Convention Center for the iconic 1980s themed celebration. Join us as we honor 50 years of hope in our community. Tickets are on sale now. Don't miss this meaningful night. Head to myharmonyhouse.org/events today to learn more.
All individuals have a right to a life free of abuse. If you or someone you know needs help, please call our 24-hour hotline, 417-864-SAFE, 417-864-7233, or chat 24/7 with an advocate on our website at myharmonyhouse.org. Visit our website or follow us on our socials to stay up on the latest news and events. This is Voices Against Violence. Thanks for listening.